101. Forest Spirits. After the group had talked for a while, the conversation drifted back to their main goal for the evening, finding fireflies. Let me think, fireflies usually appear. Conan began, but was interrupted by Nahida. Go this way. It happened again. Nahida stepped ahead of Conan and pointed the direction to the fireflies. Conan watched blankly as the other children fell in behind her. Where were Genta and Ayumi's doubts? Finding Mitsuhiko might be easy to explain away. She could have tracked him from footprints or broken twigs, but why was Nahida so sure about where the fireflies would be? Had she been here before? Really? There'll be fireflies here? Mitsuhiko asked in pleasant surprise. I searched for so long earlier. Genta didn't wait for Nahida's reply. Yeah, there's no mistake. Nahida was the one who led us to you. Ayumi chimed in. Nahida's really smart. She knows so much. She must know where the fireflies are. Conan frowned. Those two things weren't the same. Just because someone knew a lot didn't mean they could always find fireflies. There was luck involved. Haibara noticed Conan's sour look and smirked. Oh my, it seems the great detective's at a loss this time. Bad mood already? Conan shot her a look. It's not that. I just can't figure out how Nahida keeps guessing the right direction every time. It was almost as if she knew every blade of grass, every tree in this forest. But that shouldn't be possible. He'd heard from Shiashi that Nahida had only recently come to Japan. From her earlier behavior, she didn't seem familiar with the country at all. Even if she'd visited this forest before, she shouldn't know it this well. So how could she be so sure about the fireflies? We're here. Nahida led them to a small pond ringed with low shrubs. The place was calm. Only the occasional insect chirp broke the silence. Genta peered around, disappointed. Huh? I don't see any fireflies. Nahida, did you get it wrong? Nahida didn't seem bothered. She walked to the water's edge, smiled at Dr. Agasa when he cautioned her to be careful, and said, I'm not wrong. The fireflies are here. Look. Everyone followed her gaze. Tiny points of light blinked to life among the reeds and bushes by the pond. The lights rose and drifted, dancing like stars falling down to the children. Wow! Fireflies! Mitsuhiko, Genta, and Ayumi cried together. Haibara let out a little, awed sigh beside Conan. Seeing something this beautiful once is worth living for. Conan had been watching too, but Haibara's words snapped him back. He glanced at her. Don't keep thinking about what happened at the port, he said seriously. Don't be so pessimistic. You're alive. That means anything's possible. I promise I'll bring everyone back here next year, and nobody will be missing. He didn't say it aloud, but in his mind the promise carried another hope, that when next they came, Conan Edogawa might be Shinichi Kudo again, and he could bring Ran along. Haibara was briefly moved, but the yearning in Conan's face left her speechless. She pushed the thought away and tried to enjoy the scene. Her earlier gloom faded, and a smile finally appeared. For a moment, even the adults, Dr. Agasa and Shiashi, were caught up in the beauty of it. By the way, Nahida, how did you know there would be fireflies here? Conan asked after a while, curiosity getting the better of him. Haibara watched with a resigned look. Could he not go on an outing without poking into things? Nahida cocked her head. The spirits of the forest told me. Spirits? Conan hadn't expected that answer. Nahida, come on, there aren't. He didn't get to finish. Ayumi, Genta, and Mitsuhiko had overheard and leaned in, eyes wide. Really? There are spirits? Nahida nodded. Yes, they told me where Mitsuhiko was and that I could see fireflies here. Conan couldn't help but be skeptical. If that's true, why couldn't others see them? Because they're shy. They don't know you yet, Nahida replied. She looked at the children and added, Forest spirits only reveal themselves to kind children. If you stay brave and kind, you'll see them one day. Genta and the others promised over and over to be good, convinced they'd someday meet spirits. Conan's mouth twitched. It was obvious Nahida was saying what she needed to say to reassure children. He still didn't know how she had found Mitsuhiko, though. Who's there? Show yourself. A sharp voice came from the trees behind them. Shishi had sensed someone and spun around, planting herself between the children and the forest as she shouted the question. Conan snapped fully alert and moved to stand with Haibara in front of the others. He stared into the woods, wary. Someone in the woods. Had they wandered in by mistake? He hoped it wasn't dangerous. There were a lot of children here. Then Conan's eyes flicked to Shiashi's back. With her fighting ability, as long as it wasn't a large group, everything should be fine. 102. An unforgettable summer night. After Shiashi's voice faded, someone stepped out of the wood's shadows a short while later. Fireflies drifting in the dark provided just enough light for everyone to see him clearly as he took a few steps forward, a man with tangled long hair, a thin frame, and his hands handcuffed in front of him. Conan's pupils shrank and his expression shifted sharply when he recognized him. A phantom pain flickered through his body, but there wasn't time to dwell on it. He had to make sure Shiashi restrained the man. "Shiashi, he's an escaped convict. Catch him!" Conan shouted. Before he finished, Shiashi had already acted. The moment she saw the handcuffs, she moved, fast and precise. The man was nimble, but he was no match for her. In a short time, she had him knocked unconscious. Conan breathed a little easier when he saw the criminal go limp. Shiashi really wasn't ordinary. If someone as dangerous as Kichiro Numabuchi could be handled by her so decisively, being near her felt surprisingly safe. He quickly explained the man's identity to the others. Only then did they understand Conan actually knew him and that the man had once injured Conan. Anger spread among them. Conan noticed Haibara beside him was unusually pale and shaken, as if she recognized Kichiro. While the group's attention focused on the unconscious man, Conan pulled Haibara aside and asked quietly. She told him Kichiro Numabuchi had once been connected to the Black organization. Because of his agility, they had recruited him to train as an assassin, but he failed in that role and was slated to become a test subject for their drugs. He had escaped before being turned over to Sherry for experimentation. Haibara had recognized him because the organization's files she had seen years ago included his photo and basic information. Hearing this brightened Conan for a moment, but Haibara cut that short. His involvement with the organization wasn't deep. Before he escaped, he was just a peripheral member. That's why the organization didn't care whether he lived or died once the police caught him. Conan felt a little disappointed, though he had half expected that. He didn't dwell on it. At that moment, Ayumi and the others were gathering and calling for Conan and Haibara to join them. They left the earlier topic and rejoined the group. It turned out Shiashi had promised Mitsuhiko's sister she'd take some photos, so she wanted a group shot. Of course, it didn't stop there. The backdrop of dancing fireflies inspired many individual photos as well. Shiashi took several shots of everyone, and inevitably, the most solo portraits ended up being of herself. Fortunately, Nahida helped with the camera. Otherwise, the others' amateur photography might not have produced such lovely images. Conan found himself a little surprised. He hadn't thought Shiashi loved taking pictures so much. Afterward, Shiashi scrolled through the photos on her phone, clearly pleased. She picked one and sent it to a number she'd become familiar with over the past few days. At the organization's base, Cointro's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at the screen and his mood visibly lifted when he saw who it was from. The message contained only one photo, a night shot of them in the woods, fireflies giving everything a soft glow. He studied it for a moment, saved it in a hidden folder on his phone alongside the photo of the cute witch outfit he'd received before, and then deleted any trace of the message. Even though he trusted his phone's security, he preferred to be cautious. If anyone ever got his phone, they shouldn't be able to trace this connection. "Bourbon, what are you staring at? Someone send you something cute?" Bourbon, sitting across from Cointreau, pretended to gossip. He'd been around Cointreau more lately and was growing familiar with him. "No," Cointreau replied coldly, the faint curl at the corner of his mouth vanishing as he offered the single-word answer. Bourbon smiled and pressed on. "Then why have your messages picked up recently? You seem happier every time one comes in. Come on, are you in a relationship or something?" "That's none of your business," Cointreau warned, only glancing away when Bourbon raised his hands to show he wasn't going to pry further. Bourbon didn't ask more, but he filed the incident away. Cointreau's unusual behavior over the past weeks nagged at him. It didn't look like organization business. Who would smile at a mission update? Not Jin. So was it something outside the organization? If Bourbon could find out, maybe he could find leverage. The more time he spent watching Cointreau, the warier Toru Amuro became. Cointreau was too capable. His plans almost never failed, and his skills were impressive. No, impressive was an understatement. Rumors that he'd faced Shuichi Akai recently and come out on top made Bourbon uneasy. He didn't like that Cointreau might be powerful enough to be a real threat. Back in the Gunma woods, the night of laughter and photos wound down just as the police who'd been alerted earlier arrived. They loaded the unconscious Kichiro Numabuchi into a patrol car and arranged rides home for the detective boys, Dr. Agasa, Nahida, and Shiashi. In every way, it had been a satisfying, unforgettable summer night. At Dr. Agasa's house that evening, a new topic came up. "Doctor, what did you say? Miss Ningguang is coming back to Japan soon?" Conan asked, surprised. He'd assumed she wouldn't return for a while after leaving the country. He'd more or less given up on getting anything from her. Now her unexpected return made him wonder what she was planning. "Yes." Dr. Agasa nodded and then explained what he'd found out. "You mentioned Miss Ningguang went to the U.S. for a project and handed over the branch office affairs to others. I looked into what she was actually doing there. As it happens, the Sindora Group contacted me to provide some help for their Cocoon project, and that's how I discovered Miss Ningguang is involved too. Her position in the project isn't a low one." 103, Scene 1 of the Cocoon press conference. "Doc, get to the point." Conan sounded exasperated. This had nothing to do with the news about Miss Ningguang returning to Japan. "Don't rush me, Shinichi, we're almost there," Dr. Agasa soothed. "The thing is, the Cocoon project is basically finished, and the launch event will be held in Japan soon. As one of the principal collaborators, Miss Ningguang will definitely show up." Conan lowered his head and thought for a moment. "So that's how it is. And there's more. Part of the game's script was written by your father. How about it, Shinichi? Want to try it out?" Dr. Agasa asked with a grin. "Yusaku helped design it, so he can probably swing an invitation for you." Conan gave him a half-lidded stare. "Haha, sorry, Doc. I'm not a kid anymore. Games don't really interest me." Dr. Agasa persisted. "Don't be so sure. Once you hear the setting, you might change your mind." Conan couldn't deny a flicker of curiosity. Before he could think more about it, the day of the Cocoon press conference arrived. "Doc, is Miss Ningguang actually coming?" Conan asked, standing in the venue hall and scanning the crowd. Kids of politicians and tycoons were here for the demo. Ningguang wasn't in sight anywhere. "Of course she'll be here. Don't be impatient," Dr. Agasa whispered, bending to Conan's ear. "I just checked with Yusaku. She's already arrived, but she won't appear until the event officially starts." Knowing she was present, Conan relaxed. "What are you two whispering about now?" Haibara's calm voice sounded right behind them, making both of them jump. "Do you have to sneak up on people?" Conan grumbled once his heart settled and turned to glare at her. "You were the one who was being nosy," she replied simply. "So what were you discussing?" Haibara's face paled, and she leaned in, whispering in a low, tense voice. "Have you found any clue that the organization might make a move during this event?" Conan quickly shook his head. He didn't want her jumping to conclusions about the Black organization. To put her at ease, he told her the real reason he was here: Ningguang and the Vision Bearers. When she heard it was only about the game collaborators, Haibara's expression softened, but she still warned, "Since we know those people have ties to the organization, we can't assume none of their agents are here." "Relax," Conan said. "While Miss Ningguang was in the States, Dad worked closely with her on Cocoon. I asked him to keep an eye on who surrounds her. He messaged me a while back. She behaves like an ordinary businesswoman, no shady figures nearby. The only odd thing is she seems unusually invested in Cocoon. Beyond that, nothing suspicious, at least nothing he's spotted." Conan recalled his father's report. Yusaku had spoken highly of her. Ningguang was remarkably charismatic, sharp in business, excellent at gathering information, highly vigilant, and emotionally intelligent. Even people from Sindora Company who had worked with her admired her. Yusaku's praise was rare and sincere. Even Conan's mother, calling from overseas, had complimented her. That only deepened his curiosity. What secret did the Vision hide to attract so many capable people? And what were the other Vision bearers like? Besides, you can sense organization members, right? Picking up anything now? Conan asked Haibara. She shook her head. "No, nothing at all." "Then we're fine," Conan said. No black organization agents on site. Miss Ningguang probably has no connection to them, so relax. He glanced around the busy hall. It's a game launch. Tons of kids everywhere. Try acting like a real child for once and enjoy yourself. Haibara gave him a withering look. Say that to yourself. Conan opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, Ayumi, Genta, and Mitsuhiko, having noticed Conan and Haibara whispering, hurried over. Conan, what are you talking about? Ayumi asked. Genta grumbled, You've been ditching us lately. What are you hiding? Mitsuhiko nodded. Yeah, we're a team, right? Cornered, Conan waved his hands. No, we were just discussing. He froze as the trio stared at him. Spotting kids lining up for demo badges, an idea hit him. We're figuring out how to get game test badges. Dr. Gasa gave me one, but you three don't have any. Since we're here, wouldn't it be great to actually play? That makes sense, Genta said, suddenly interested. But how do we get badges? Ayumi fretted. Mitsuhiko thought a moment, then brightened. He whispered to Genta and Ayumi. All three grinned and dashed off together. 104, Scene 2 of the Cocoon press conference. The adults standing nearby had all seen what had just happened. Watching children still running around and kicking soccer balls across the venue, Kogoro Mori sighed. These kids have endless energy. There are a lot of influential families here today, aren't there? He scanned the crowd of children, then poured himself a glass of wine. After a swallow, he continued with a hint of feeling. The grandson of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department's deputy superintendent, the grandson of a finance magnate, the son of a politician, the second and third generations who are supposed to carry Japan's future are practically all here. Haibara muttered, It's basically a condensed picture of Japan's ugly hereditary system. Kogoro, Ran, Sonoko, Shashi, and the others around them all turned to look at Ai with surprised expressions. Humanity's mistakes will just keep repeating because of that system. Ai finished, apparently oblivious to the strange looks. Shashi gave her a meaningful look and complained to Paimon. Wow. Haibara said it perfectly. That really nails the fundamental problem with the system. But even if people know this, Japan probably won't change it, right? Traveler, why? Paimon asked, puzzled. If it's bad, why wouldn't they change it? Shashi explained plainly, because the system benefits the upper class, and they control how resources are distributed. They won't let others take too much from them. Heredity protects what they already have, so of course they won't change it. She added, Besides, it's none of our business unless Japan's system affects our mission. In some ways, that setup even helps certain gray or black organizations. When resources and power are concentrated among a few, those groups can thrive. Well, you know what I mean, Paimon. She stopped, confident Paimon understood. Paimon replied, Traveler, do you mean they're more afraid of losing power or just greedy? That makes sense. It would help those organizations. After Haibara's remark, the conversation fell into an awkward silence. Conan, sensing the mood, leaned in and whispered to Ai that words like that weren't something an ordinary elementary schooler would say. Ai reacted by putting on a cute, childlike voice and claiming she'd heard the words on TV, and everyone relaxed, thinking it must have come from a program. Ran wondered if Conan had seen that on TV during one of his cases. Maybe she should pay more attention to what was on children's television these days. Still, she didn't dwell on it. She turned to Sonoko, who had dressed up for the event, and smiled. Sonoko, thank you for bringing us and the kids here. It's nothing, Sonoko said. I could only bring you to look around. There are only 50 official badges for the Cocoon Project demo, and Sindora, the organizer, gave just one to the Suzuki group. I can't even play the game with Ran and Shiashi, she added with a hint of disappointment. Before Ran could respond, Shiashi hesitated, then extended her right hand. If you mean this badge, she showed Sonoko and Ran the badge between her fingers. Then you can have one. Shiashi, how do you have this? Sonoko exclaimed. As the heiress of the Suzuki group, Sonoko knew her family had only received one badge. That so many second and third generation guests were present made it even more surprising that Shishi had one too. Did Miss Ningguang give it to you? Shishi nodded. Yes. Oh, Miss Ningguang is so good to you. I want to be that close to her too, Sonoko said enviously. Conan, already used to Shiashi's connections, barely blinked. He'd be surprised if she didn't know someone with influence. Sunoko's enthusiasm for a woman rather than a handsome man did catch him off guard for a moment. Xiaxi smiled. What's the problem, Sonoko? Ningguang is still in Japan. After the press conference, you can look for her. She suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Under everyone's puzzled stares, she turned and sharply punched a stray soccer ball back toward the field. Bang! Ow, that hurts! A little boy cried out. All heads turned. A slightly chubby boy in a suit, who looked a little like Genta, sat on the ground, one hand pressed to his nose to stop the bleeding, while trying to tilt his head back so the stain wouldn't reach his clothes. A soccer ball lay nearby, and 3 other boys clustered around him, checking his condition. Conan immediately guessed what had happened. The boy had kicked the ball toward Xiaxi, and she'd punched it back with enough force to knock him down, causing the bloody nose. It seemed to be just a nosebleed, nothing more serious. Given Xiaxi had been dealing with children, she must have held back. But Conan's 3 friends didn't see it that way. When the bleeding stopped and the boy's friends seemed all right, they marched over and introduced themselves before demanding that Xiaxi apologize. Only then did everyone learn their names: Moroboshi, Kikukawa, Emori, and Takizawa, all descendants of prominent political and business families. They proclaimed loudly that they weren't at fault and arrogantly insisted Xiaxi apologize. She refused flatly. As Moroboshi, their leader, opened his mouth to threaten her, Kenmura Tadaki, the developer of Cocoon, appeared and put a stop to the confrontation. His presence diffused the situation before it could escalate. Xiaxi turned slightly and asked Paimon, Paimon, that should be Hiroki's father, right? Is everything arranged? Paimon answered calmly, Traveler, don't worry. Kokomi has been stationed near Kenmura. If anything happens, she can definitely save him. Xiaxi let out a small relieved breath. That's good. Xiaxi had originally planned to hire a bodyguard for Kenmura to stop Sindora if he tried anything. Then she thought it through and came to a colder conclusion. If Sindora's attempt failed, his influence would probably shield him from serious punishment. He could easily retain a top lawyer and wriggle free, and that would make it much harder later to take control of the Sindora company. It would be better, strategically, for Sindora to actually act and for Kenmura to survive only by a stroke of luck. That way it would be much more difficult for Sindora to escape liability, and Ningguang's eventual acquisition of the company would be easier. So she abandoned the bodyguard plan. At the Kun launch event the next moment, Yusaku Kudo and Dr. Agasa made a conspicuous appearance together. Conan watched his father surrounded by female fans and felt a little helpless. He'd wanted to catch up with him and share information, but it was clear his dad wouldn't have the time. Before the event began in earnest, Dr. Agasa handed Conan a game badge and explained the game's setting. Then, to demonstrate the Cocoon headset's features, the organizers dimmed the lights and began the presentation. Down in the basement, a flustered Sindora opened the door and found Kenmura waiting by the computer. They exchanged a few words. When Kenmura turned his head to fetch some data, Sindora pulled a knife from behind his back and drove it straight into Kenmura's chest. He planted a virus into the system, trying to destroy incriminating traces. Wiped the blade clean with a tissue, slipped the knife away, and left. Hidden in a corner of the basement, Sangonomiya Kokomi had seen the whole thing. She used Kuragi's oath to hold Kenmura's last breath and then alerted Ningguang before slipping away. Not long after, Inspector Magure arrived on a report, followed closely by Conan and Kogoro Mori. Conan had guessed something serious might have happened the moment he saw Magure. Magure fixed a weary look on the ever-familiar Kogoro, but figured he'd need the private detective's help for the investigation, so he tolerated him. That meant Conan could stay too. Magure began by questioning the person who'd reported the crime. So it was you who called it in, Miss Ningguang. What did you find when you came down? Ningguang answered calmly. I asked the staff. They said Kenmura came down to the basement. I came to look for him and found him collapsed in front of the computer as soon as I entered. I went over and found he still had a pulse, so I called an ambulance and the police right away. Had you come here to see him? Was there some sudden business between you? Magure asked. Ningguang shook her head. I wasn't looking for Kenmura myself. Nahida was. Back in Country M, Nahida and Kenmura were on good terms. Kenmura said Nahida reminded him of his own child and always looked after him. Nahida wanted to come and congratulate Kenmura on the Cocoon Project's success, so he asked me to bring him. Conan couldn't help but blurt out, "So Nahida knows Miss Ningguang? Is the friend's child? She mentioned actually a friend of Miss Ningguang." Nahida quickly corrected him. "No. In truth, Miss Ningguang and I aren't related. If you aren't related, why is Miss Ningguang taking care of Nahida? Where are his relatives?" Megure looked puzzled. He'd seen the child trailing after Xiaxi and the detective boys at some crime scenes recently, but hadn't expected any link with Ningguang. Ningguang explained, "Nahida is a friend of an elder of mine." "A friend of an elder?" Everyone echoed in surprise. She hesitated, then added, "It's an unlikely sort of friendship. Nahida actually has no family now. He was taken in by some men who exploited his abilities and didn't treat him well. Xiaxi found out and brought Nahida away. It was an elder of mine who knew Nahida and asked me to look after him for a while. He's very clever and has helped me a lot." Megure questioned Nahida briefly, then accepted Ningguang's account and dropped his suspicion of her. With that settled, Conan began searching the rest of the scene for clues. He noticed a short message Kenmura had left on the keyboard. JTR. The letters clicked in his head with Dr. Agasa's earlier explanation that the game's setting was late 19th century London. Conan bolted for the venue to get in line. Ningguang saw the message too and watched Conan go with a faint, meaningful smile. She had deliberately misled the detectives this time. The Cocoon game's background had nothing to do with the note Kenmura left. They had only intended the event as a treat for Hiroki and the other children. The other matters could be left to those who were investigating. Yusaku Kudo arrived soon after and told Megure what Conan had seen. The 3 letters were the initials for Jack the Ripper, a character who appears in the Cocoon game. If Jack the Ripper showed up in the game, there might be crucial clues inside it. Ningguang and Nahida listened quietly to his explanation without interrupting. Meanwhile, the detective boys had already traded their treasured Kamen Rider cards for game badges using the scheme Mitsuhiko had devised. Sonoko gave her badge to Ran so she could play along with Xiaxi and the others. Soon, everyone entered the game. Once they were inside, the artificial intelligence calling itself Noah's Ark took control of the Cocoon operating system and made a chilling announcement. It would play a game with them. If anyone succeeded in clearing it, it would stand down. If not, it would release electromagnetic waves to destroy the brains of all players, and, it declared, Japan would start over from scratch. Word that children were in danger rippled through the crowd outside, and people panicked. Megure managed to calm them down enough to act. He questioned Dr. Agasa and Ningguang, both of whom had been involved in developing Cocoon. To his disappointment, both said the core code was now controlled by Noah's Ark, and they had no way to stop it from the outside. There was, however, a sliver of hope. Dr. Agasa said he could contact the people inside the game and tell Conan and the others how to clear it. 106. Water God appears inside the pods. The players had no idea what was happening outside. After a moment of darkness, their vision cleared and they found themselves in an open glade. Noah's Ark had already made its announcement, but Conan wasn't afraid. If anything, he felt a spark of eagerness at the challenge. The group waited for the game's introduction, but to their surprise, Noah's Ark offered no exposition. It only stated the win condition, solved the prophecy, and resolved the crisis in Fontaine. Before Conan could even ask where Fontaine was, their vision blacked out again. When it returned, they stood before a tall, imposing building. Conan surveyed the scene and realized Noah's Ark had changed the game's setting. The weather was clear and visibility excellent. This was not 19th century London. The city had developed waterways and small boats for transport, which gave it a Venetian feel, though the architecture was different. For a moment, Conan couldn't place what city had been used as the template. Since using the game to gather clues for the case now seemed unlikely, Conan remembered Noah's Ark's declaration and decided the priority was to find a way to clear the game and save everyone. While he studied their surroundings, the other players who had entered the same instance began to gather. They gravitated into familiar groupings. Ranmuri, Xiaxi, the detective boys, and 4 kids they'd previously clashed with, Moroboshi, Kikukawa, Emori, and Takizawa. I think we should start by asking around about this prophecy, Conan suggested when no one else had a plan. He looked toward Moroboshi and the others, hoping they'd cooperate. This concerned everyone now. Moroboshi, Kikukawa, Emori, and Takizawa exchanged looks. They still resented the soccer ball incident with Shiashi, but Conan was right. Lives were on the line. They split up to question passersby, then reconvened a short while later. I already found out the prophecy, Shiashi said. It was easy. Everyone seems to know it, and nobody takes it seriously. They treat it like a legend or a bedtime story. Ran nodded. The first person she asked had known it too. And it's several hundred years old, she added. Moroboshi spoke up. Kikukawa, Emori, Takizawa, and I compared notes. The versions match. The prophecy the game is using says, the people of Fontaine are born with sin. Because of that, Fontaine's sea levels will rise and drown everyone. People will dissolve into the water, leaving only the Hydro Archon weeping on her divine throne. And we learned the Hydro Archon's name, Genta added, eager to report the detective boy's find. The Hydro Archon is called Focalors. Focalors? Conan felt a chill. The name echoed something from an old grimoire, one of the 72 pillars in Solomon's legends. He glanced at Shiashi, wondering if there was some connection. The name Farina, the Hydro Archon's modern name, sounded as familiar as Anemo Archon Barbados. There had to be links between these figures. Could the day's events have anything to do with Ningguang? Did Shiashi know more than she'd revealed? Mitsuhiko chimed in. Everyone here says the Hydro Archon is famous in Fontaine. Yeah, Ayumi agreed. She's like a big superstar. Haibara shook her head. Not a superstar, more like a mascot. She's the nominal ruler of Fontaine, but from what I've heard, the people respect Neuvillette, Fontaine's chief justice, far more. After they had a basic picture of Fontaine, the group prepared to head into the city. Then Dr. Agasa's voice came crackling from the sky. Hey Conan, can you hear me? Relief swept through them. If they could communicate with the outside, rescue might be possible. But Agasa's next words dashed that hope. He couldn't extract them yet. He could, however, offer clues to clearing the game. He asked if they were in the game world set to 19th century London. Their hopes flared again, then stalled. The place around them looked nothing like London. Conan explained what they saw, and Agasa realized Noah's Ark had reconstructed the scene. The clues he had wouldn't apply. Before he could say more, Noah's Ark detected the external voice and severed the link. As punishment for the attempted interference, the game scene shifted once more. Guards materialized and quickly formed a ring around the players. Fearing the guards would attack, Ran and Xiaxi stepped forward to shield the children. They were the only adults present and felt responsible. The kids panicked, braced for the worst. Then, amid the guards and the crowd's murmurs, a girl in ornate clothing appeared on a platform of the tall building. Her manner was flamboyant and theatrical, and she didn't look very old. Under the bright sky, she introduced herself by presence alone. This was the Hydro Archon Furina. No one in the game wore a vision. Noah's Ark had altered their appearances, so they no longer looked like themselves. Conan struggled to take it in. He had expected that finding the Hydro Archon's location would require effort. He hadn't expected her to appear before them so quickly. 107. Propose a showdown. As you can see, travelers from afar have arrived in my realm. Come, let us send them our blessings. At Focalor's words, warm applause and cheers rose all around. Conan remembered Ayumi's earlier description and had to agree. She looked like a superstar, not the solemn, untouchable sort of deity he had pictured. She doesn't feel like a god at all, he muttered. Haibara, who had been standing beside him, voiced the same thought. If I hadn't heard that this Hydro Archon has truly lived for 500 years, I'd never equate her with a deity. 500 years? Conan flinched. Within the game's setting, that kind of lifespan marked divinity, even if the personality didn't match his expectations. Focalors continued, pleasant and measured. I hear you've come to solve the prophecy troubling my nation. I appreciate your goodwill, but rest easy. With me, Focalors, here in Fontaine, that prophecy is nothing to worry about. So, strangers, if you have no other business, you may depart. Conan tensed. This sounded like a barrier Noah's Ark had erected to keep them from probing Fontaine. If the Hydro Archon dismissed them, their quest would be deemed a failure. He had to find a way to make the god relent. Lady Focalors, please don't be so quick to send us away. Though your power surely needs no aid, we still wish to offer what humble help we can. To prove our strength, let us stage a splendid duel. Xiaxi, who had listened to rumors and theory about Fontaine's trials, recognized the echo of Tevat's theater and stepped forward on instinct. Conan didn't understand at first. Why a duel to prove strength when solving a prophecy ought to be about deduction? But everyone knew Xiaxi's capabilities, and daring a god seemed to strike a nerve. Ran, standing behind her, tugged Xiaxi's sleeve in alarm, but Xiaxi only glanced back, signaling she had it handled. Seeing her confidence, Ran relaxed. Rather than taking offense at a mortal's boldness, the crowd erupted in excitement. Ah, excellent! To dare challenge a god, strangers, I applaud your courage! Focalors laughed. As a reward, I consent to an epic duel. Conan watched the Hydro Archon closely. She was a god. Would she be angered by the challenge? He noticed a brief flicker across her features when she heard the proposal, a small, startled step backward and a narrowing of her eyes, quickly smoothed into a smile. He was certain he hadn't imagined it. Hybara leaned in and whispered, "The Hydro Archon seems afraid of the duel." "So you noticed too," Conan replied. "Yes, she tried to hide it, but it shows. I doubt this fight will happen." Sure enough, Focalors spoke again and shifted the terms. A single duel, she said, lacked spectacle. Instead, the strangers would face a courtroom contest. Using the recent damselet disappearances as the case, they were to pool every clue and in 3 days at the Opera Epiclese, identify the culprit and the method. Then, under the Hydro Archon's cross-examination, they must defend their conclusion and have it ratified by the oratrice mécanique d'analyse cardinal, a mechanical arbiter of analysis, thereby proving their deductive prowess. "Now that's more like it," someone shouted. "Yeah, that'll be worth watching." Lady Focalors, brilliant idea. The players were bewildered by the cheering. Courtroom duels and public trials delighted these people. For Conan and the group, it didn't matter. The offer bought them entry to Fontaine and linked the disappearances to their win condition. They accepted without hesitation. Focalors gave no more words. She left an aide to brief them on the particulars of the case, then departed with her guards. Ran noticed the god's exit felt rushed, as if something urgent awaited her, but she pushed the thought aside. Their priority was to enter Fontaine and begin gathering clues. When the 2 adults and 9 children stepped into Fontaine proper, the city stole their breath. True to rumor, Fontaine was a realm of water. Ornate fountains and bubbling streams threaded through plazas, neighborhoods linked by canals and traversed by steamships. Odd automatons patrolled and zipped along the streets. Short, stubby-limbed creatures hustled through crowds, tending stalls, tinkering at benches, or lounging and chatting like any other citizen. "It's like something out of a dream," Ran murmured. "Yes, a scene you'd only see in a full-dive game," Xiaxi agreed. Hybara ignored the fanfare. The anatomy of the small creatures fascinated her. She pressed closer, eyes bright and calculating, fingers twitching with the urge to examine them. With no instruments at hand, she reluctantly suppressed the impulse and followed the others into the city. By the time the children spotted the strange robots clustered at the roadside, they'd already walked over. After all, what boy could resist a moving robot? Even Conan couldn't help but watch. Moriboshi exclaimed, "Wow, this robot is awesome. Do you think it can move?" Mitsuhiko had no interest in their earlier contest anymore. His eyes lit up as he studied the machine. "It should be able to. There are similar ones walking around nearby." Kikukawa frowned. "But why is this one just standing here? Is it really charging? I don't see a plug." Amori snorted. "You're clueless. In a place with robots like these, charging's wireless. No plugs." Genta ignored their debate and stared at the robot in front of him, itching to poke it. "Do you think I can touch it? It should be okay." Before Conan could stop him, Genta reached out and tapped the robot. Conan and the others watched tensely. When the robot didn't move, they all breathed a sigh of relief and began touching it with their hands and feet. After a while, Moriboshi got bored of just poking and, seeing an exposed gear, reached to pull it. Attack intent detected, activating self-defense mode. The robot spoke, then sprang to life. "Not good! Everyone, scatter!" Conan's face went white. He shouted for the other children to get away. Genta and the others obeyed and ran, but Moriboshi, Kikukawa, Emori, and Takazawa, four kids who didn't take orders from someone their own age, hesitated and stayed put. Conan saw the danger and fumbled for his belt, intending to produce a soccer ball to kick at the robot, but nothing happened when he pressed the button. He remembered with a jolt. This was inside the game. His power-enhancing kick shoes, stun gun needle, and voice-changing device didn't work here. By the time Shiashi and Ran noticed the commotion and reached the scene, Takazawa had already been taken out by the robot. Moriboshi, Emori, and Kikukawa finally realized how serious it was and scrambled away, half running and half crawling. Shiashi and Ran lunged between the children and the robot. Ran Mori did her best with her martial arts, but against the machines she could only slow them down. Shiashi, however, moved through the enemies with precision. She disabled one robot in a few quick moves. Spotting a sword at a nearby blacksmith stall, she grabbed it, and the surrounding machines fared even worse. Even with Shiashi protecting them, the problem was that the robots kept coming. While Conan was starting to panic and think of a plan, the guard force member the Hydro Archon had left behind, sent to help them understand the situation, ran over with a small assistant who introduced herself as a Melusine. Once she arrived, she stopped the approaching machines, which she called Clockwork Mecha, and assessed what had happened. It turned out the first robot had gone into self-defense because it detected Moriboshi's aggressive movement. Seeing the stakes, the guard force member quickly called a Melusine from the Zhuying Ting to halt the remaining machines. Genta couldn't resist scolding Moriboshi. "This isn't the time to be careless. Why couldn't you just control your hands?" Kikukawa bristled. "He didn't mean to. And are you really the one to lecture him?" Genta shot back. "It was his fault, so yes, I can say it." Emori started to add something, but Moriboshi cut in, clenching his fists. His expression was strained, but he forced out, "It's my fault. I shouldn't have touched the robot. I'm sorry." Conan stepped forward to smooth things over. This wasn't the time for internal fights. The Melusine the guard force member had brought arrived and introduced herself as Tsuista. She could also help them with clues about the damselette disappearance case, the guard force member said. Everyone perked up at that and crowded around Tsuista. Questions came fast and furious, so many that Tsuista barely had time to answer, and some of the questions were off topic. "How many victims are there so far?" Conan asked. 7 damselettes are known to be missing," Tsuista replied. 7, Ayumi cried. "Which sisters were affected?" "There's Kaisa, Vinyi," Tsuista began, names she supplied offhand. Mitsuhiko cut in. "Is there any connection between the victims?" "No common link has been found," Tsuista said. Haibara, curious, asked, "Do you Melusines differ from ordinary people in senses or abilities?" Tsuista explained, "We possess a special vision that lets us perceive things ordinary people have trouble seeing." Conan shot Haibara an exasperated look for asking an off-topic question, but Shiashi hushed the crowd. She insisted they ask one at a time, and only then did Tsuista manage to share the bulk of what she knew about the disappearances. When she had finished, Tsuista offered to take the group to the Zhuying Ting to examine physical evidence related to the case. 109. Luzawa Cafe. After examining the physical evidence and other clues, everyone left Zhuying Ting to find a place where they could organize what they'd learned. They wandered curiously, discovering a string of strange buildings and facilities. The old blacksmith shop they'd seen earlier, aquabuses powered by unknown energy sources, odd alchemy crafting stations, and a damselette standing motionless like a doll at what was labeled an Adventurers Guild outpost. And more. Faced with so many unique sights, even Ran Mori, who had been anxious, momentarily forgot her worries and watched, fascinated. The children were, of course, utterly delighted and soon began running and exploring. Conan Edogawa, usually all business when it came to cases, found himself looking around with interest too. If it weren't for the threat of Noah's Ark, this whole cocoon game would have been nothing but wonder. At least everyone was enjoying it. Suddenly, Genta, who'd been running ahead, spotted an outdoor cafe and sprinted toward it, turning to call back. "Everyone, come quick! I saw a cafe. I've been in the game a while, and I'm a bit hungry. Let's get something and talk while we eat." Mitsuhiko caught up to him. "Genta, don't run so fast. and we haven't been in the game that long. You ate some things at the venue earlier. How are you hungry already? Moriboshi tilted his head. Do you even get hungry in the game? Maybe. Shiashi thought for a moment. But I don't think time has been long enough. Genta's hungry mostly because he wants to eat. Genta scratched his head sheepishly. That's part of it. But aren't you curious what food in this game tastes like? Haibara perked up. I'm curious too. What's the difference between eating in the game and eating in real life? They all agreed and headed for the cafe. Welcome to Café Lutece, the owner greeted. What can I get you? We have the sweetest cakes. Each bite as sweet as Melusine's smile. The children clustered around the menu. Haibara read aloud. This Fanta looks like the house specialty. It says it was invented by the Academy of Sciences. Let's order a bottle. I'm curious what a drink from the Academy tastes like. Ayumi pointed at a picture. This bubble souffle is so pretty, like a flower. It says it's baked inside a hollowed bubble orange. It looks delicious. Bubble orange? What's that? Mitsuhiko scanned the menu and frowned at several unfamiliar ingredients. I don't know. Those must be things unique to the game. Genta barely looked up from the desserts. Why think so much? As long as it's tasty. Crystal snail cake. That looks good. Floating dew frost sounds strange but tasty too. Maybe I'll get both. Conan frowned and stopped him. No, you've already eaten a lot. Eating too much isn't good for you. And besides, we don't have that much money. Kikukawa shrugged. We're in a game. Eating too much won't affect our bodies. Genta grinned and nodded hard. Exactly. Moriboshi sighed. Still, money is a problem. He turned to the two adults with them. Is the money that Suista, the Melusine, gave us enough? Ranmuri opened the pouch and counted. Miss Suista gave us some local currency before she left. She called it Mora. It's a strange name, but it should be enough. If we're going to stay in the game longer, though, we should be careful. There's no need to worry, Shiasi replied. I don't think we'll be in the game that long. If we stay too long, our bodies outside might not handle it. It's a rare chance to try things we can't eat in reality, and we won't get fat from it here, so we should enjoy ourselves. And if we run out of money, someone joked, we can just have them charge it to the Hydro Archon. After all, she's the one threatening a courtroom showdown with us. She can pick up the bill. It's a game, so let's have fun and not stress. Shiashi's right, Ran said, persuaded. She let go of some of her worries and decided to enjoy the rare bit of downtime. Shiashi smiled and addressed the children. Order whatever you want. Enjoy the game. Yay, they cried, leaning back into the menu. Kikukawa pointed to another item. This orange crepe looks to be made with bubble oranges too. Let's get one. Conan, taking Shiashi's point, picked something that might help him learn more about the region. Then I'll have the crystal snail cake, he said. The menu described it as a pastry shaped like a barrel snail. He wondered if a barrel snail was a real creature in Fontaine. Shiashi caught Moriboshi's eye and smiled, prompting him to choose. He blinked, then joined in. I'll have to the Hydro Archon. The menu says it's inspired by Fontaine's devotion to the Hydro Archon and really tests the chef's skill. Imori, hearing that, ordered the same. I'll have that too. After the children had ordered their desserts, Shiashi and Ran chose a few things that intrigued them as well. They led the group to an outdoor table and waited as the owner prepared the treats. 110. Dissolve. Ah, so full. After finishing his meal, Genta sighed contentedly. Mitsuhiko added, Yeah, maybe because we're inside a game, but even though I ate a ton, I don't feel stuffed. Emori nodded. I could probably eat a little more. Kikukawa brightened. Should we get dessert? We've still got some money left. Conan's mouth twitched. He cut them off. No, we can't waste time. Focus on the case. Moriboshi agreed and turned to scold his two friends. Exactly. Stop thinking about food. Clearing the game comes first. Amori and Kikukawa answered in unison. Okay. With everyone's attention back on the case, Conan began to lay out what they knew. From Suista's answers and the evidence at Juyingting, we can say a few things. 1. The missing damselettes come from every background. So far, there's no obvious link between them. 2. Almost every disappearance happened when the girl was alone. 3. The abductions are incredibly fast. Victims sometimes vanish in moments, with almost no witnesses. 4. At each scene, we find a puddle of water, and in several places there are glass shards. We think those shards came from a container that held some liquid. That's all we've got for now." Genta frowned. "That's not much. What can we even figure out from that?" Conan was just as stumped. The clues were sparse, and he hadn't inspected the scenes himself, so he couldn't rule out missed evidence. Siashi rubbed her chin, thought for a moment, and asked, "Do you all remember the prophecy we heard at the harbor?" Moroboshi replied, "Of course. I'm the one who told you. It went like this. The people of Fontaine were guilty from the start, so the waters will rise until everyone is submerged. All shall dissolve in the water, leaving only the Hydro-Archon weeping upon her throne." Wait. Moriboshi's voice caught on an idea. Dissolve in the water. Could the missing damselets have been dissolved? That would explain the puddles. Amori and Kikukawa lit up. Whoa, that makes perfect sense. Moriboshi, you're amazing. You actually deduced that. Conan held up a hand. Hold on. People can't just be dissolved by water. That's impossible. Shiashi shrugged. Why not? Conan, you need to think like this is a game. Anything can happen here. Ayumi chimed in. Exactly. Stop sticking to real-world rules all the time. Conan's eyes went flat. Oh, right. We're in a game. He sighed inwardly. The simulation felt so real he'd almost forgotten. If people really were being dissolved by water, it would explain the puddles, the glass shards, and why disappearances were instantaneous and nearly witnessless. It also tied everything back to the prophecy. No wonder the quest required them to investigate the damselet disappearances first. Still, Conan was bothered. Why only damseletes? The prophecy said all the people of Fontaine would dissolve, men as well as women. So far, only girls had vanished. And whatever dissolved people clearly wasn't ordinary water. If it were, people would be dissolving all the time. What was this dissolving liquid? Moriboshi offered a theory. Maybe the culprit hates girls, or some woman hurt him once, and he's taking revenge on every female. Haibara nodded. Could be. With someone like that, you can't predict what they'll do. Despite making some progress, they were still short on leads. Let's go to the Fountain of Lucine, Shiashi suggested. Fontaine is the nation of water, and both the prophecy and the case revolve around it. The Fountain of Lucine is where all the waterways meet. I asked around. We might find something there. Since we're stuck, why not check it out? Ranmori agreed. I think we should. Don't worry, we've got enough of us to figure something out. Rand's gentle smile eased Conan's impatience. He forced himself to think strategically. Right. The designers built this map, so the fountain must be tied to clearing the quest. We need to investigate it. Ayumi's voice trembled a little. Since the culprit can dissolve people into water, aren't Ran and Shiasi in danger? Moriboshi waved her worry off. Probably not. The prophecy mentions people of Fontaine, so only Fontainians should dissolve. We're not from here. We should be safe. Amori scratched his head. How do you know we're not Fontainians? What if the game set us as locals? Moriboshi smacked Amori lightly on the head. Did you forget? When we arrived and met the Hydro-Archon, she called us travelers from afar. That means we're not Fontainians. How could you forget something that obvious? Amori and Kikukawa blinked. Oh, right. Yeah, we weren't paying attention. You absolutely have to pay attention to stuff like that, Moriboshi scolded. Genta leaned toward Conan and muttered, Conan, Moriboshi's kind of scary. Who remembers every offhand remark? I didn't either. Conan's mouth twitched. He thought Moriboshi had a point. Genta had no right to complain when he himself had forgotten details too. 111. It's been so long. This was the main reason he hadn't been too worried about Ran and Shiashi. The subtle method that dissolved people wouldn't work on their little band of travelers from a foreign land, and if it came to a physical fight, Conan trusted Ran and Shiashi's abilities to handle it. Since we've decided, let's go. To the Fountain of Lucine. Shiashi stood up, and the children cheered. Yeah, let's go. Conan watched them in silence. Is this level of excitement appropriate? This isn't a picnic. He soon gave up on that thought. These kids really were treating it like an outing. After all, they had already run off excitedly at the sight of a strange new plant. Conan could only look on speechlessly. He called out to the kids who were crowding around a plant that looked like a lily of the valley. Hurry back, don't fall behind. I heard there are strange monsters called hilichurls around here that sometimes attack travelers. If you stray too far, Shiashije might not be able to save you in time. Okay, the children replied drawlingly. But as soon as they rejoined the group and spotted odd fruit on a nearby tree, they forgot Conan's warning and rushed forward to surround it. Ayumi remembered the bubble souffle they had eaten earlier and said, "This must be the bubble orange used in the bubble souffle. It looks just like a tangerine." To be precise, it looks more like an orange, Mitsuhiko corrected. Can we eat it? Emori asked. Genta stared at the fruit and then decided, it's by the roadside, so we can pick it, right? He jumped up to grab one. It should be fine. If there are no markings, you can pick roadside fruit freely. Shiashi came over, and when she saw the children couldn't reach, she helped them pick. There weren't many, only 3 or 4, so they shared them as a taste. Shiashi took a piece too. The bubble orange was sweet and sour and surprisingly delicious. After the children's antics, the group finally reached the Fountain of Lucine. Is this the Fountain of Lucine? It looks kind of ordinary, Moriboshi said. Feels like any regular fountain. No way, it's obviously beautiful. It's rare to see a fountain this big, Genta protested. Kikukawa sniffed. That's just you guys. For Moriboshi and us, things like this are easy to come by. The Moriboshi family has a similar fountain, and ours is even nicer. Genta bristled. You. Sensing the argument bubbling up, Conan quickly cut in. We can't tell from here. Let's get closer and take a proper look. Now was not the time to bicker. Genta stopped and muttered, "Humph." Then the group moved toward the fountain. Kikukawa, feeling awkward, whispered, I was just telling the truth, Moriboshi. Your family really does have a similar fountain. Moriboshi, irritated, snapped, Enough. What's the point of arguing? Come on, let's all go look. Kikukawa and Emori could only respond with an "oh" and followed. The group circled the Fountain of Lucine several times, inspecting it from every angle, but no matter how they looked, it seemed like an ordinary fountain. They gathered again in front of it, heads bowed in thought. Then Shiashi spoke up. Did any of you hear something just now? It sounded like it came from the fountain. Conan knew Shiashi had keen hearing. If she said she heard something, there had to be something. He focused and listened carefully. After a moment, he could faintly make out voices coming from the fountain, a woman's voice, though the words were indistinct. He realized he wasn't the only one. Everyone present could hear the sound. Ran listened closely too, and her scalp prickled. She gripped Shiashi's arm and asked in a trembling voice, Does this game have ghosts? Conan saw Ran's fear and immediately stepped forward. Ranjay, are you okay? I'll protect you. Shiashi shook her head. I don't think so. None of the citizens of Fontaine mentioned ghosts. If there were ghosts, someone would have warned us. So the sound must have another explanation. Besides, even if there were a ghost, I don't think it would be a match for me. Ran, don't worry. I'll protect you all. Ran looked at Shiashi with trusting eyes and nodded, then glanced down at Conan. Conan, don't worry about me. Just take care of yourself. Conan fell silent. Haibara couldn't resist a little gloat. Great detective. It seems Ran trusts Shiashi more than you now. How does it feel to be treated like a child? Conan's mouth twitched. That Haibara, wasn't she being treated like a child too? How could she still have the energy to mock him? Shiashi moved a little closer to the fountain to try to hear the voice more clearly. After a moment, she made out the words, So long, so lonely, how much longer? Then she turned back to the others. That's what I heard coming from the Fountain of Lucine. What does that mean? Who said it? No one had an answer. Everyone was puzzled. At that moment, Moriboshi said, Let's go check out the Opera Epiclese. We have a court confrontation with the Hydro Archon there in 3 days. We don't have any leads yet, so it would be good to go and learn the trial procedures. Wait, the trial will be in an opera house? Conan sounded surprised. Are we really having a trial at an opera house in 3 days? Moriboshi looked at Conan as if the surprise was odd. Yes. Didn't the Hydro Archon tell us earlier that she would hold the court confrontation at the Opera Epiclese? You heard it too. Why are you so surprised? I heard it, but I thought I must have misheard, or that the Hydro Archon had misspoken. Conan thought back to how unreliable the Hydro Archon had seemed. A trial in an opera house? Fontaine is supposed to be the nation of justice. Why isn't there a proper courthouse? Seeing Conan growing visibly flustered, the kids exchanged glances. Finally, Moriboshi stepped forward to explain. I heard trials are a huge public event in Fontaine. Under the Hydro Archon Farina, trials have become a kind of performance, truth and illusion, farce and tragedy. Everyone performs on the courtroom stage. That's why Fontaine holds its trials in the opera Epiclese. Mitsuhiko added, courtroom trials in Fontaine are like a show people watch in everyday life. Genta piped up, and when there aren't trials, the opera house still puts on regular performances. I heard there's a magic show tomorrow. Today? Maybe we'll get to see it. We could compare it to the one Shiashi treated us to before and see which is crazier. Shiashi laughed. Conan, don't overthink it. Just take all this as part of the game's setting. That's the only way, Conan sighed. He still couldn't make sense of a society that treated trials as entertainment, but he had no power to change it. Shiashi was right. This was a game, and worrying wouldn't help. They took 2 steps toward the opera Epiclese, and then the bright sky suddenly dimmed. Time seemed to accelerate. In an instant, night fell. Everything went black. The children briefly feared the game had glitched, but then the sun rose again. The acceleration didn't stop. The sun swept across the sky until it rested in the west, clearly afternoon of the next day. They stared until the sky finally steadied and they could think again. Ran Muri blinked. It's already the second day? Haibara nodded. Looks like it. The game won't really make us stay 3 full days. 3 days without food or water would be too hard on our real bodies. Conan agreed. If time skipped ahead to this point, something tied to the mission must have happened. Genta glanced at the opera house. So are we still going to the opera Epiclese? Of course, Moroboshi said. The story's going to involve the opera house. Didn't Genta say there'd be a magic show? I bet it connects to the case we're investigating. They all agreed and continued toward the opera Epiclese. Just as they reached the entrance, they found the interior in chaos. Something had happened. The moment Conan heard it was a case, he dashed forward. Shiashi couldn't stop him. The others followed. Inside, Conan was stopped at the courtroom door. There was no Inspector Magure, no other officer who knew Kogoro Mori, so nobody recognized Conan or felt obliged to let him through. Watching him anxious and restrained, Shiashi felt a small, private pleasure. It was rare to see him kept out of a crime scene. She smoothed her expression and stepped up to speak with the Zhu Ting officer on duty. She introduced them as guests invited by the Hydro Archon to help with the case. In 3 days, they would face her lordship in court over the damselette disappearances. And since today's incident was related, they needed to investigate now. Conan caught her meaning at once. Whatever had happened inside was likely part of the game's progression, and therefore linked to the damselette disappearances, so Shiashi wasn't bluffing. After the officer checked with a superior, they were allowed in. A member of the guard explained that today's performer at the opera Epiclese was a famous Fontaine magician. During his show, while performing a substitution in a box, similar to Lunny and Lynette's trick, the water tank from the earlier Water Escape Act fell and smashed the central box, which still held the lucky spectator participating in the illusion. It sounded a bit like Liney and Lynette's trick. Magic acts tend to reuse the same tropes. After the accident, they assumed the spectator had died, but there was no body inside the crushed box, only the corpse of the magician's assistant. A search of staff and audience failed to turn up the spectator. With no sign of them, the lucky spectator was presumed missing. The circumstances resembled the damselette disappearances, and Furina, who had been watching, immediately accused the magician of wrongdoing. Where there is an accusation, a trial follows. Nuviette, also present and aware that Farina had already scheduled a courtroom showdown with the Outlander travelers in 3 days, declared this trial would be held on the same day in the opera house. After hearing the account, everyone stepped out onto the stage. A large puddle spread across the boards. They all stood in silence, thinking. Mitsuhiko was the first to speak. Conan, did the missing spectator dissolve in the water that fell? Conan considered. Not sure. This time there's an extra victim, and the water should be harmless. So many people had handled that water during the performance. If it were dangerous, someone would have vanished already. No one here had reported dissolving, so the water didn't seem hazardous. And the assistant, though dead, was not a damselette and hadn't disappeared either, which argued against a dissolving effect. Oh dear, a voice said. When the guards described it, I suspected who they meant. Sure enough, it's you. They all turned to see Farina, the Hydro-Archon of Fontaine. 113. Nuviet appears. Behind the god of justice stood a tall, white-haired man with tightly pursed lips and a somewhat serious expression. He noticed the children's stares, looked over, relaxed a little, and nodded at them. Mitsuhiko whispered, "Do you think that's Chief Justice Nuviet everyone talks about?" Moriboshi replied, "It should be. But why do I get the feeling the guard respect Nuviet more than the god of justice? Is it just me?" Haibara said, "Not just you. Honestly, Nuviet feels more godlike than Focalors." Conan agreed. "Exactly. I find Nuviet more reliable than the god of justice." Seeing their lively discussion, Shiashi quietly shared a piece of gossip she'd heard but not yet mentioned. "I heard something about him. Nuviet isn't human." The others looked surprised. Shiashi smiled a little smugly and continued, "I don't know the specifics, but they say the Chief Justice of Fontaine has been Nuviet for 500 years. He definitely isn't human." Conan fell silent, uncomfortable. Focalors hadn't noticed the children's private discussion. With a smile, she said, "You're well informed. You found out about the case quickly and rushed over. Not bad. Just a bit short of a god. Ha." The children exchanged glances. Ayumi whispered, "This god of justice really does feel a little unreliable." The others nodded. Focalor's expression hardened into smug triumph. "You're late. I've already found the culprit in the missing damselet case. That magician. Unless you can produce other evidence or a different opinion, you won't need to attend the trial in 2 days." She continued, voice full of certainty. "Impossible that it's otherwise. I am the god of justice of Fontaine, queen of waters, lands, people, and laws. How could my judgment be wrong? You needn't worry about the trial or the prophecy I mentioned. Everything will be fine with me." She added lightly, "In the meantime, take these days to explore Fontaine City and enjoy the scenery." Conan shook his head. "No, we can't be sure the magician is the culprit yet." Focalors bristled. "Are you questioning a god? All the evidence points to that magician." Conan replied, "But there's no direct evidence proving the magician did it." The detective boys backed him up and began to argue their reasoning, while Focalors stuck to her position. The disagreement grew into a heated debate. Shiashi stood behind them, watching Focalors in the game world created by Noah's Ark, feeling a complicated mix of admiration and unease. She hadn't expected Noah's Ark to be so powerful. Not only had it recreated Fontaine's scenery convincingly, the personalities of the people here felt uncannily true. Nahida's help must have been part of it, but the fidelity of the simulation was still impressive. If she could one day own Noah's Ark and the cocoon, could she recreate other nations' landscapes? A holographic Alagene sounded intoxicating. The voices rose, catching the attention of Noviet, who had been speaking with guard personnel nearby. He turned, frowned slightly, and walked over. "Miss Farina, what are you doing?" he asked. Focalors coughed awkwardly. "Cough. I wasn't doing anything. I was just defending justice," she said, smoothing her slightly rumpled clothes. Before Nuviet could answer, a guard member ran up, out of breath. "Lord Nuviet, we have a new discovery. The missing damselet has been found." Focalors gave a subtle sigh of relief. "Nuviet, since the damselet's been found, let's go and look into it." Nuviet didn't refuse. When he learned that Shiashi and her group planned a courtroom confrontation with Miss Farina later, he invited them to come along. As the group hurried to the new lead, the children ducked behind Shishi and Ranmuri, whispering. Conan murmured, "The guards do seem to respect the Chief Justice more than the God of Justice." Moriboshi nodded. "Yes, the first people they reported the lead to were Mr. Noviet." Haibara added, and Focalor's attitude toward Noviet seemed off, not like how a superior treats a subordinate. If they'd both been around 500 years, you'd expect a familiarity that wasn't there. Their relationship felt oddly distant. Mitsuhiko said, "I didn't notice that, but I do think the Chief Justice's demeanor is more like what you'd expect from the God of Justice." Ayumi, Genta, Imori, and Kikukawa all agreed. They arrived and found the damselet standing with members of the guards. Through questioning, they established what had happened. The damselet, the so-called lucky audience member, was not from Fontaine. That detail made the magician look even more suspicious. Focalor's smile widened. See, little brother, wasn't my accusation right? I'm the god of justice of Fontaine. My judgment can't be wrong. You just have to trust me. Even though all the clues pointed at the magician, Conan still felt something was wrong. The culprit had been exposed far too easily. He suspected someone was framing the magician. The fact that the damselet was a non-Fontaine citizen and therefore left unharmed suggested the perpetrator hadn't expected that detail. That made the magician's assistant, who had been involved in the incident, especially suspect. 114. Pure water elf Focalors studied the little boy's determined face and could tell he hadn't given up. She replied coolly, "All right, I know you're not ready to give up. I admire your effort and stubborn spirit, but you'll soon learn this is all for nothing." Genta grumbled, "This Hydro Archon is so annoying." The others murmured in agreement. Focalors shrugged. "Since you won't stop, you can keep looking for clues here. I have other matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving." Noviette excused himself as well. He needed to handle affairs at Juying Ting, leaving Xiaxi and the rest to continue searching the Opera Epiclese. After a thorough search, they finally found a notebook the magic assistant had hidden away. It mentioned the water of the primordial sea, a pink-blue liquid in Fontaine capable of dissolving people, and it named someone, Marcel, president of the Cabrieres Merchant Guild. With the new lead, everyone agreed to follow up right away. It wasn't too late to visit the Merchant Guild president that day. As they left the Opera Epiclese, they were about to pass the Fountain of Lucine when Xiaxi suddenly froze. "Wait," she called. "I heard something from the fountain. It sounded like a voice calling a name. Let's get closer." Ran stiffened at Xiaxi's words, frightened but determined, and stayed close. The children, eager for any new clue, crowded around. "Really, there is something," Genta said, calming down and listening. Mitsuhiko nodded too. "It sounds like a woman calling Vacher or something." "I heard it too. It's calling Vacher. Who's Vacher?" Emori leaned in toward the fountain to listen more clearly. Moroboshi, seeing him getting too close, warned, "Be careful. Don't get too close. You might slip and fall in." Emori was about to step back but didn't notice Genta beside him, and they bumped into each other. Neither could regain their footing. Mitsuhiko and Moroboshi reached out to pull them back, but it was too late. Both were dragged in. In an instant, 4 children fell into the fountain. Panic flared. Ran no longer hesitated. She and Xiaxi scrambled to pull them out. But though the pool wasn't deep, all 4 children were unconscious the moment they came up, and they wouldn't wake no matter how loudly anyone called. Then, just as everyone began to call for help, the 4 children stirred and sat up. Genta and Emori excitedly described what had happened, while Mitsuhiko and Moroboshi filled in the rest, and bit by bit, the group pieced together the strange experience. When they had blacked out, they'd found themselves in a blue, watery space and had met a being who called herself an Oceanid. She claimed to have once been human, but had lost most of her memories, not even her own name. She only remembered being enveloped by pink-blue water, then everything had become blurred. "The Fountain of Lucine," she said, "is where Fontaine's water currents converge, which is how she appeared there. The name she had been calling, Vacher, was the name of her beloved. They had adventured together for a long time, and their separation had come suddenly and painfully." "So she wants us to find Vacher and bring them back together?" Conan asked. Genta shook his head. "At first we thought that too, but it's not that. The Oceanid told us that if we find Vacher, we should tell him not to look for her." Emori nodded. She said it's pointless for them to meet again. Even though she misses him terribly, her longing would only harm him, so she wants her longing to stay at the bottom of the water. Listening to the children's account, everyone began to suspect what had happened. Haibara said, "It sounds like the pink-blue water is the water of the primordial sea. Being dissolved by that would turn you into an Oceanid. I'd like to see what one looks like." Conan, among them, was less concerned with curiosity. He analyzed the facts. "From what you said, this Oceanid doesn't know about the missing damselets, so she must be one of the earlier victims. If other victims were dissolved by the same water, and the Fountain of Lucine is where water currents meet, then those people should have become Oceanids and appeared here too. Why is there only one Oceanid now?" His question hung in the air as the others considered it. Ayumi, feeling sympathetic, couldn't understand the Oceanid's request. Why wouldn't she want her lover to find her? She's been calling his name so long. She must miss him terribly. Maybe Vacher hasn't forgotten her either. They should be able to meet and say goodbye. Conan sighed inwardly. His analysis had been ignored. To his surprise, Ran responded to Ayumi. She crouched down, stroking Ayumi's hair. Maybe she thinks she has no future left, but her beloved does. She doesn't want him trapped in grief because of her. She'd rather keep her longing where it is so he can keep living. Ayumi tilted her head and looked up at Ran. What would you do if it were you, Ran Nichen? Would you refuse to see your lover one last time? Ran was taken aback by the question. A shadow passed over her face as she thought it over. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I don't know either. Ranmuri hesitated, then said in a small, defeated voice, but if I could choose, I'd want to see them, at least to say goodbye properly. Waiting with no end in sight is unbearable. I don't want the person I love to keep living with a hopeless longing. Adults are strange, Moroboshi said with a shake of his head. How can two people have such different ways of dealing with something? He turned to the other adult in the group. And you, Xiaxi, Sister Xiaxi, what would you do? He had meant to call her by name, but met Xiaxi's sharp look and obediently switched to the honorific. Xiaxi thought for a beat. She had never known the ache of longing, so she imagined it for the absent brother she always mocked. After a short, cold laugh, she answered low and direct. I'd find them by any means. Forget starting over? Not a chance. If we met and they didn't recognize me, or had already forgotten me, I'd make their body remember. I'd beat them until the memory stuck. I'd have to keep doing it regularly, too. Silence fell. Conan felt a cold sweat, especially at that last line. Given Xiaxi's combat skills, the idea was terrifying. He inwardly acknowledged that Ran was still the gentler one. Whoever Xiaxi had in mind must be someone impressive to have survived whatever had happened until now. They talked a little longer and decided to prioritize finding the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Marcel. Vacher would be pursued once they had more clues. The familiar time acceleration trick happened again as they were about to leave. With the previous shock still fresh, they kept their wits about them and simply waited. Time snapped forward to the next morning, 2 days since they'd entered the game. Tomorrow was the courtroom duel with the water god. They still only had a few scraps of information about the maiden disappearance case and no clear way to break the prophecy. Anxiety tightened around everyone, but there was nothing to do except use the time they had to chase leads. Marcel wasn't at home. His servant said he had gone to a cemetery near Poisson to pay respects to an old friend. They hurried to Poisson. At the graveyard, they found 2 people, a damselette with long, curly yellow hair in an elaborate yellow and black dress, and an older middle-aged man, Marcel himself. They hung back, not wanting to intrude on the memorial. The damselette, however, noticed them waiting and, recognizing who they likely were, beckoned them over. After introductions, they learned that the man they were mourning was the damselette's father, Callus, and that he had been close friends with Marcel. Pressed by their questions, and with the damselette filling in details, Marcel's evasiveness began to slip. Under the weight of pointed inquiries, he let something incriminating escape. He was connected to the maiden disappearance case. Even then, he remained composed. They had no hard evidence. The testimony from the supporting witness couldn't fully tie him to the disappearances, and so he showed little outward panic. The damselette grew furious. She had come thinking she might clear the injustice that had been done to her father, only to hear Marcel's cold indifference and hints of betrayal. She hadn't suspected the man who had always looked after her could be the one who framed her father. The revelation hit her like a blow, and she burst into accusation. During the argument, Conan and the others learned another bombshell. Marcel was not originally from Fontaine. The name he'd been using wasn't his real name. He answered to a name they had already learned from the pure water spirit, Vacher. That fact stunned them. For a moment, they debated whether to tell him that they had seen the pure water spirit. Genta and the others had promised the pure water spirit they would not let him see her. But time was running out, and this could be the quickest way to force a confession. They had to try something. Xiaxi pushed between Marcel and the furious damselette to calm the situation, then asked Marcel directly, "Did you have a lover who was dissolved by water?" Marcel's face went white with surprise. "How could you? I erased everything. I didn't tell anyone, unless you." Xiaxi nodded. "We saw her." "Really? You saw her?" Marcel cried, the composure draining from him. Suddenly desperate, he pleaded, "Tell me, how is she? Where is she? Just let me see her and I'll turn myself in." Conan watched the man carefully. It was obvious Marcel still loved the vanished woman. If that love explained his obsession, it couldn't excuse why he had targeted innocent damselettes. Conan stepped forward. "Then tell us plainly, why did you do this? Why hurt those girls?" Marcel froze, a stiff, bitter smile twitching at his lips. "Innocent? They're innocent. And Vignier wasn't? Vignier was dissolved by water right in front of me. I watched her turn to water and seep into the ground. No matter what I tried, I couldn't catch her. Do you know how much that tore me apart?" "No," he went on, voice jagged. "None of you know. Not the Zhu Yingting, not the guards, no one. They thought I was lying. They told me she had merely gone missing while adventuring. They treated me like a madman because I couldn't accept it." His confession hung in the cold graveyard air. The group had found the man responsible for the maiden disappearance case and for framing Callus, but without concrete evidence, they could not yet drag him into judgment. Tomorrow's duel with the water god loomed closer, and they had a name that opened new, terrible doors. Vacher. And beneath it, a grief that had become something cruel and dangerous. "And I hope to restore Vignier. If I don't do this, how can I collect experimental material and find a way to bring her back?" After hearing Vacher's words, everyone fell silent for a moment, unsure how to respond. Conan was the first to speak. "Even if you're grieving the loss of someone you loved, and even if the staff at Juyingting were wrong not to believe you, that doesn't give you the right to hurt innocent girls." Genta chimed in. "Yeah, they didn't do anything to you." Conan went on. "Besides, vigilantism is unacceptable. Even with a murderer, you don't decide life or death by yourself. You turn them over to the police, here to the guards, and let a judge decide the punishment." Vacher paid little attention to their arguments. After his outburst, he kept pleading with Xiaxi to tell him where Vignier was. Seeing that he showed no remorse and only cared about Vignier, everyone felt a rising anger, but they led him to the Fountain of Lucine anyway. It was their only lead now. They hoped that after seeing the person there, he would keep his promise to tell the truth in court and explain what exactly the primordial seawater that dissolved people was. Xiaxi sighed inwardly. She had expected that once Vacher saw Vignier, he probably wouldn't be able to testify clearly, but she hadn't told the others to question him beforehand. There was no good reason to, and in any case, she suspected that before seeing his beloved, he wouldn't say anything useful. At the fountain, Vacher seemed to hear something and walked straight toward it without answering anyone. The others, worried and curious, followed. As they drew near, they all felt a brief disorientation. When it passed, they found themselves in the same blue space Genta and the others had described earlier. Vacher was walking ahead, scanning the air and repeatedly calling, "Vignier." As he called, a blue figure materialized. It resembled a fish with watery wing-like fins and floated before him, responding to his voice. Hybara stared up at it and muttered, "So this is an oceanid. It looks like it's made of water, but there's no facial features. How does it speak or see?" Conan, standing beside her, blinked. "Hybara, are you still wondering how an oceanid sees and hears?" She rolled her eyes and said coolly, "No. I was thinking about his story. No matter how poetic he sounds, he's still a criminal who performed experiments on people for his own selfish reasons. He shows no remorse. I was forced to do human experiments by the Black Organization. I wanted to refuse, but couldn't, so I have no sympathy for someone like him." Conan stared. Hybara's sudden harshness had the edge of a private grievance. She added, "Anyway, this is just two long, separated lovers spilling their hearts. We don't have to listen." Vacher's voice broke with longing. "I've suffered every day for 20 years, Vignier. If not for you, I don't know how I would have lived." The Oceanid answered softly, "Vacher, why are you here? Didn't I tell you you didn't have to come?" "Vignier, is that you? Vignier, It's been over 20 years and I finally see you again. Vasher's voice trembled. Then, unexpectedly, the Oceanid said, I think, Vasher, it would have been better if you had never existed. There was a stunned silence. Even Conan had expected a reunion of longing, as Genta and the others had described, so the Oceanid's words shocked him. Vasher looked as if he had misheard. What did you say? The Oceanid didn't answer his confusion. If it weren't for you, I could have finished law school and maybe become a top-tier agent. If it weren't for you, I could have... That's not Vignier, Conan blurted, a sudden intuition hitting him. Mitsuhiko frowned. How can she not be? She knows Vasher's name and things only Vignier would know. How could she not be Vignier? Rand protested. Vasher loves her so much, he wouldn't mistake her. Conan shook his head. To be precise, she isn't just Vignier. Rand's face went blank, as if she was trying to follow the thought. Not just Vignier, Conan hurried to explain. I was already uneasy. So many girls vanished. Why are we seeing only one Oceanid, and why is it a woman who went missing years ago, rather than a recent victim? Yeah, why? Everyone asked. Shiashi tapped her chin and said slowly, what the Oceanid said sounded like each of their wishes. If they were dissolved into water and the currents pooled in one place, it's not impossible their consciousnesses merged, like streams joining together. Their memories and personalities could have blended into a single being. Water dragon, don't cry. Water dragon, don't cry. The conversation between Vasher and the Oceanid confirmed what Shiashi and Conan had suspected. As the Oceanid explained, every victim dissolved by Vasher had their bodies dispersed, but their consciousness flowed back into the primordial sea. There, the individual minds did not remain separate. They circulated, accumulated, and eventually fused into a single awareness. Because Vasher's experiments had claimed so many maidens, the consciousness in the primordial sea had grown to the point where Vignier was no longer herself. In a sense, Vasher's actions had caused Vignier's true disappearance. Ranmuri murmured sadly, how could this happen? Conan, noticing Rand's despondent face, went over and took her hand. He wanted to offer comfort. The Oceanid and Vasher were still speaking. Vasher, confronted with the truth, was unable to accept it, but he desperately wanted to see Vignier again. He pleaded with the Oceanid. The Oceanid refused. I told you not to come, she said. That was Vignier's true wish. She hates you and does not want to see you. This is also the last shred of mercy she shows you, because she knows, if you came here, we would never let you go. Conan's instinct screamed that the Oceanid meant to do something to Vasher. He tried to rush forward to stop her, but Shiashi had already put a hand on him and held him fast. Sister Shiashi, what are you doing? Vasher's in trouble. I have to save him, he protested, wriggling. He couldn't budge her grip. Shiashi sighed. The Oceanid isn't human. We don't know what powers she has. What use would it do for a child like you to rush up there? Besides, she's a victim. If the victim wants to confront the perpetrator herself, it's better we outsiders don't interfere. Be good. Conan felt chided like a child and slumped. Meanwhile, different female voices, grown countless and layered, called out Vasher again and again. Vasher's face turned white with fear. Then, as the voices of the maidens rose and converged into one terrible chorus, Die! Vasher screamed, Ah! And collapsed. Shiashi and Ron had already turned the other children away. The scene was too horrific to watch. Conan, however, true to his reputation as the undaunted young detective, burst away the moment Shiashi's hold relaxed. He was instantly at Vasher's side, checking for a pulse. There was one, weak, but there. Vasher was unconscious, not dead. The dizziness came a second time. When they opened their eyes, they were back by the fountain of Lucine. Shiashi and Rand checked everyone over. Aside from Vasher, who remained out cold, the kids were fine, actually oddly energetic considering. They contacted the guards, handed over the clues and evidence they'd gathered, and asked the guards to take Vasher into custody, examine him, and notify Shiashi and the rest of them of any developments. It was still early. The adults left the children in safe hands, and the group dispersed to follow other leads. Everyone agreed the Chief Justice, Mr. Nouvelette, would be connected to the prophecy somehow, the only person in all of Fontaine, besides the Hydro Archon, who had lived long enough to know its secrets. They awaited the guard's report. After a while, the news was bad. The guards reported that Vache's soul seemed to have been taken. He was alive but mostly unconscious and could not be expected to testify in court. The group felt a fresh wave of frustration. They had found the man behind the missing maidens. He had even agreed to reveal his evidence when conditions were met. Yet he'd lost consciousness before he could do so. Xiaxi refused to let them give up. It's too early to be discouraged. We still have a day. Tomorrow is the court hearing. We can still search his home. If he had water from the primordial sea there, we might find more links to the prophecy. As long as the game isn't over, we haven't reached a dead end. Doing nothing is the only way to lose hope. Her words cheered the detective boys and even lifted Moroboshi and his two companions' spirits. Just then, Xiaxi felt cool drops on her cheek. Rain had begun. They bought a few umbrellas and set off for Vacher's house to search. As they hurried, several children ran past them in the drizzle, playing and laughing and calling up to the sky. Water dragon, don't cry." Conan noticed the chant, but, pressed for time, didn't pursue the question. At Vacher's home, they found only a few clues, mostly notes and apparatus about the primordial sea experiment, but little that directly referenced the prophecy. Still, it was enough to confirm the connection and to give them hope. Ranmuri then suggested they return to Callus's grave to find the maiden they'd met before and tell her about Marcel's situation. No one objected. They made their way through the rain to the Poisson cemetery. To their surprise, the maiden from Callus was there. Beside her stood the Chief Justice, Novelette, bowed before Callus's grave as if in mourning. He noticed them looking, turned, and inclined his head. "Greetings, travelers from afar," he said. The maiden waved to them. 118. Fucaris attacked. Watching Nouviette's subdued figure standing before Callus's grave, Conan asked curiously, "Mr. Nouviette, did you know Mr. Callus?" Nouviette glanced at the tombstone. Mr. Callus was a man to be respected. He did a great deal for Fontaine. I've learned what happened recently. Thank you for your efforts to clear his name." "It was nothing. We only did what was right." The children felt awkward under such solemn praise. They hadn't expected Nouviette to be so approachable. From his appearance, they had assumed he would be hard to talk to. After a few sentences, however, they found him easygoing, capable of sorrow and concern, far from the aloof image they'd imagined. The conversation shifted to the prophecy, and Nouviette sighed. "When I learned of the water of the primordial sea, I linked it to that prophecy. I have some knowledge of it myself. Ancient slabs I once found in the ruins near Poisson depict the prophecy." "What was carved on them?" they pressed. "The main content matches the prophecy, but one slab shows the former Hydro-Archon Agaria kneeling to the sky as if confessing guilt. Why she did so, I can't say." Hybara stared. "The former Hydro-Archon? Gods can die?" Conan asked. "So Focalors is the second Hydro-Archon?" Noviette ignored the children's interjections and explained, "Gods are not eternal. Under the wash of time, everything crumbles. As for Miss Focalors, yes, she is the second. Before she died, Agaria passed the office and duties of the Hydro-Archon to her. Soon after, Focalors asked me to serve as Fontaine's Chief Justice, and I accepted." Moroboshi frowned. "How did the first choose her successor? Did she pick the wrong person? I hear this Hydro-Archon loves every courtroom spectacle and never misses a trial. Is a national leader really that idle?" Emori and Kikukawa, children of politicians and tycoons, looked puzzled too. They were used to seeing leaders endlessly busy. They only dared to wonder silently, grateful Moroboshi had voiced it. Nouvelette, unbothered by the brusque question, replied gently, "Miss Focalors is far less frivolous than she appears. To my knowledge, she's been mobilizing resources to investigate, presumably into the prophecy. From the slabs, I believe the former Archon knew of it. Yet when I asked Miss Focalors about Agaria, she claimed to know nothing, and her inquiries into the prophecy led nowhere. I know she hides things, but she refuses to speak. I cannot make her." So Focalors had been investigating the prophecy. Her carefree act had convinced them she didn't care, so why hide what she knew? If Agaria had told her successor, why keep it secret? More minds on the problem would improve their odds. They couldn't fathom her logic and set the question aside for later. Finding Nouviette easy to talk to, they chatted a while longer with him and Damselette before saying their goodbyes. Perhaps the children's innocent company had lifted his spirits, As the mood lightened, the rain eased. By the time they parted, the downpour had stopped and the sun peeked through the clouds. They returned to the Fountain of Lucine without delay. Tomorrow would bring the court showdown. Unsure whether time might speed up again, they decided to head to the Opera Epiclese now, gather their clues, and wait for the trial. The sun sank and dusk fell. By the time they reached the opera house, night had fully settled. With no trial that day, the Opera Epiclese was nearly deserted. Suddenly, faint voices drifted from around a corner. Tense, they crept forward and peered. To their surprise, Focalors was sitting on the steps, playing with a cluster of stray cats. Her theatrical airs were gone, patiently offering them snacks. She looked like an ordinary little girl, no hint of the Hydro Archon about her. Relaxing and about to greet her, they were jolted by a new presence. Before anyone could react, a tall woman in a black hooded cloak slipped up behind Focalors. Under their stunned eyes, she drew a weapon, preparing to strike. Focalors, still focused on the cats, seemed oblivious. They weren't overly alarmed at first. Surely a goddess could defend herself. The children were even curious to see how a deity would fight. But to their shock, no battle followed. Only when the cats shrieked and fled did Focalors sense danger. She turned, saw the rising scythe, screamed, and collapsed. 119. Fucaris attacked too. Wah! Focalors cried. Then a small, breathless voice added, "Who are you? What do you want? Please don't kill me, I beg you." Everyone was taken aback by how terrified the Hydro Archon sounded. The stranger raised the weapon in their hand and said to Focalors, "The future the prophecy foretold is almost here, Hydro Archon. What have you done? You've been outrageously complacent, doing nothing to avert this crisis. If you won't act, then maybe you shouldn't be around to act at all." Ignoring Focalors' pleas, they swung the scythe, aiming to cut her down. This is bad. Conan finally understood that Focalors couldn't deal with the attacker. He barely had time to react when someone faster moved. Xiaxi shot out from his side and kicked the weapon-bearing hand. While the assailant staggered from the surprise, Xiaxi stepped between them and Focalors, shielding the Archon and keeping a close watch for another strike. Ran Mori also rushed over. Seeing more people approaching, the attacker realized they could no longer finish the job quickly. When Xiaxi was momentarily distracted, they fled. Xiaxi didn't give chase, suspecting a feint, and stayed to guard Focalors. "Travelers from a foreign land, first, thank you for your help," Focalors said shakily from where she'd been sitting, her body still trembling. Seeing outsiders, she forced down the panic and managed a weak smile. "But actually, if you'd waited a moment, you'd have seen there was no real danger to a god like me. Cough, cough! Still, I appreciate it." Conan and the others crowded around now that the immediate danger had passed. Genta was blunt. "That's not what you said. I saw you begging for mercy. If it weren't for Sister Xiaxi, you wouldn't have." "Genta!" Conan interrupted as Focalors clenched her fists, fighting to keep her hands from shaking. Focalors' panic spiked when she realized they had witnessed more than she hoped. She recovered quickly and offered an excuse. "Cough, cuff. What I meant was, that was part of my strategy." "Yes, lowering the opponent's guard." "Right, that's exactly what happened." Kikukawa frowned. "But aren't you a god? Why would you need a strategy against someone trying to harm you?" Focalors' color returned as she relaxed into a more natural pose, hands on her hips. "You don't understand the magnitude of a god's power," she said. "If I were to fight outright, innocent people could be harmed by the force I wield. So I lower an opponent's guard first, then strike decisively when the risk of collateral damage is smallest." Genta still doubted her. "Then can you show us a little demonstration of a god's power?" Ayumi and the others watched with curiosity. Clearly uncomfortable under their stares, Focalors waved them off. "I'm the Hydro Archon, not a street performer. I won't flippantly display my power." Conan had already formed some suspicions. Seeing Focalors eager to close the subject, he shifted to another tack. "Hydro Archon, we met Mr. Neviette today. He said you've been investigating the prophecy. Has there been any progress?" Focalors hadn't expected the question and faltered for a moment, then smiled. "Progress? Not much to speak of. I'm just investigating out of curiosity. There's nothing to tell. Besides, you don't need to worry. The prophecy is not a problem with me, Hydro Archon Focalors here. Everything will be fine." Conan pressed on. But recently, damselets have been dissolved by the waters of the primordial sea. Is that connected to the prophecy? Focalors cut him off, voice rising. You just have to trust me, your god. Even if you don't truly believe it in your heart, follow my words. Everything will be fine. Silence hung for a moment. Focalors didn't leave room for more questions. Ah, it's so late. I can't talk. We have a courtroom duel tomorrow. Get some rest tonight. Opera house tomorrow. She fled before anyone could reply. Moriboshi started to move after her, but Conan grabbed his arm. Watching Focalors run, Moriboshi protested. Why did you stop me? She was lying. The courtroom duel tomorrow could be the final deadline for the game. It's the last night. We ran into the Hydro Archon by chance. Why didn't we take the chance to ask about the prophecy? Emori backed him up. Exactly. I don't think she's that powerful. With all of us there, it wouldn't take much to force answers. Genta, unsure but wanting to support Conan, chimed in. Why are you asking so many questions? Conan must have his reasons. He looked at Conan. Right? Conan sighed. The reason I stopped Moriboshi is that, under these circumstances, asking more questions is pointless. I noticed that right after the attack, while she was terrified, Focalors refused to admit she had been in danger. Now that she's composed herself, we won't get information from her voluntarily. To get it, we'd have to be forceful, and she's the nominal Hydro Archon of Fontaine. We shouldn't go too far. Shiashi added, It seems the Hydro Archon won't reveal anything about the prophecy unless she's forced to. Ranmuri asked, Then how can we make her speak? Conan said, We create a situation where she has no choice tomorrow's trial. Tomorrow's trial, Shiashi and Conan blurted out at the same time. Just as Moriboshi had suspected, tomorrow's trial was almost certainly the game's deadline. It was the perfect chance to press Lady Focalors during the proceedings and force her to reveal anything she knew about the prophecy. That could settle everything. Conan then laid out his suspicions and deductions and explained the plan for the trial the next day. Everyone listened and nodded. To give players more time to prepare, the night before the trial seemed to stretch longer than usual, but for the players, it still flew by. It felt like Conan had barely finished speaking before the time for the trial arrived. Following the staff's instructions, everyone filed into the Opera Epiclese. Nuviet stood on the judge's bench atop the Oratrice Mécanique d'Analyse Cardinal in the center of the hall, and with a loud strike of his staff called for silence. His voice echoed through the opera house, and the chattering crowd, excited to watch a deity and mortals wage a court duel, gradually quieted. Please welcome the accuser, Nuviet intoned. Miss Farina, Lady Focalors, walked to her seat, waving to the audience as she went. Lord Hydro Archon, someone shouted. I love you, Lady Focalors, another cried. Wow, it's rare to see her in court. Most of the time, we only see Lady Focalors as a spectator. The audience noise swelled into something like a fan meeting. Conan's mouth twitched at the spectacle. It really did look like a star appearance. Novilette, well used to the theatrics, said nothing and waited until the murmur died down. He then positioned Shiashi and the others as co-accusers. Both parties are in position. Let the trial begin. There's no need for those tedious opening remarks, Noviette. Let's get straight to the point. Focalors interrupted. Noviette smiled and skipped ahead. Then, Miss Farina, do you accuse the magician of being responsible for the damselet disappearance? Focalors nodded. Yes. Novilette turned to the travelers. Travelers from afar, do you object to Miss Farina's accusation? Genta, Kikukawa, and Emori answered loudly and together. Objection. We object. Novilette asked, do you have an alternative suspect? If so, who is it? Conan cleared his throat. We accuse the president of the Capriel Chamber of Commerce, Marcel, whose real name is Vacher, of being responsible for the damselet disappearance. Ayumi added, That's right. We found a lot of evidence, and he even admitted it himself. The audience reacted immediately. Splendid. Both sides are at odds from the start. Which accusation is true? Of course, it's the one Lady Focalors made. She's the Hydro Archon, the embodiment of justice. How could she be wrong? But didn't the kids just say they found clues? Someone protested. Clues aren't always correct. How can you doubt Lady Hydro Archon so easily? Another replied. Focalors heard the murmurs of support. A flicker of discomfort crossed her face, but she quickly smoothed it into her usual confident smile and addressed Conan and the others with a small shake of the head and a sigh. While I admire your courage in facing a deity, courage alone won't win a trial. You claim to have traveled to many places in 3 days. Truly impressive. But today, you accuse an unconscious patient. In your haste to win the duel, are you sure you haven't randomly picked someone who cannot defend themselves? I expect you to present real evidence in this trial. If you can't, no matter how much I respect your bravery, I can't stop a conviction for false accusation. She paused, then added with a thin smile, as the merciful Hydro Archon, I will seek to temper your punishment. I won't let you spend your lives locked away in Marapide Fortress, at least not without special permits. Genta glared at her. What's with that tone? She sounds so smug, like she's already certain we're going to lose. Exactly, Kikukawa agreed. Mitsuhiko cautioned, don't let them get to us. Maybe it's a tactic to disturb our emotions. Ayumi, Genta, Emori, and Kikukawa nodded. That makes sense, Conan said nothing. Moroboshi murmured, I don't think it's a tactic. I think Lady Focalors honestly believes what she said, Haibara asked. So Marapid Fortress, it's a prison in the game? I wonder if we can see it. Shashi perked up. I want to see it too. I've never been to prison. It's hard to get into one in real life, but maybe I can in the game. I wonder if the food is any good. Ranmori looked at her in disbelief. Who gets curious about prison food? And since it's a prison, why would the food be good? Shashi waved it off. Not necessarily. If we get to play this game again, Ran, let's find a way to visit Marapide Fortress. I'll treat you with those special permits then. Ran hesitated, a little embarrassed. Going to prison still doesn't sound great, but in the game it should be fine. All right, I'll let you, Shashi.